I never thought that becoming a stepmother would lead me to this point, where I ended up marrying Jake's father. I knew it wouldn't be easy, especially for Jake. He'd lost his mother not long before, and I didn't want to step into a role that felt so unnatural to him. Jake kept to himself, retreating into his room as if the walls were a fortress. I'd knock occasionally, offering snacks or inviting him to dinner, but he always declined. I felt a pang of sadness. I was there to help create a new family, yet it felt as if I were intruding on his grief. Then, one stormy night, everything changed. The power went out, plunging the house into darkness. I'd go into his room as if the walls were a fortress. I'd knock occasionally, offering snacks or inviting him to dinner, but he always declined. I felt a pang of sadness. I was there to help create a new family, but it felt as if I were intruding on his grief. Then one stormy night everything changed. The power went out, plunging the house into darkness. Into darkness, I could hear Lily, my young daughter, whimpering in the living room. I did my best to soothe her, but I could tell the storm rattled her just then. I heard a sound from the hallway. I called softly, "Jake, come here. We can wait it out together." To my surprise, he joined us. We lit candles, and I began to tell. I told him stories from my childhood, about times when we'd laughed and had adventures. As I did, I could see Jake's eyes light up. I felt a connection between us, one I hadn't expected. We shared fears and dreams, and as the storm raged outside, the walls Jake had built around himself began to crumble. I felt something shift within me. Jake, he wasn't just my stepson anymore, he was a young man trying to cope with his grief. In that moment, I wanted to be a source of comfort for him, but I knew that would be difficult. I started to notice the way Jake looked at me, how his gaze lingered a little too long, how he smiled at my jokes, and how our conversations changed. I hadn't expected our conversations to become so intense. I tried to ignore my feelings, telling myself it was just the connection formed in the wake of our shared vulnerabilities. One night while Jake was asleep on the couch, I sat in the armchair nearby and watched him. My heart was heavy with a mix of. He looked so peaceful, lost in dreams. I felt a protective urge, but the longer I watched, the more complicated my feelings became. Days passed, and the tension between Jake and me grew. It was a tightrope walk, trying to balance my role as his stepmother with the undeniable connection we had forged. The connection we had made was clear in every shared laugh and every lingering glance. It made me question everything I had believed about boundaries. One evening, I found Jake sitting on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon in vibrant hues. I joined him, the air heavy with an unspoken weight, as we talked about the usual stuff: school, Lily's antics. I could feel the atmosphere change again, like there was a kind of electric current in the air. "Have you ever thought about starting over?" I asked, my voice soft. He turned to me, his expression serious. Sometimes it's hard to know what moving on really means. The vulnerability in his voice really struck a chord with me. We shared our own struggles and talked about how hard it was to fill the void left by my late husband. It was a raw moment, and I felt the connection between us deepen as we opened up about our fears and regrets. Then I took a leap. "Jake, there's something I need to tell you. I've been feeling a connection with your different. I'm scared, but it's true." I watched as his eyes got wider and a look of surprise came over his face. "He feels it too." He admitted it in a quiet voice, "but it's so confusing. I don't want to hurt anyone, least of all you." I replied, my heart racing, "But I can't pretend I don't care." We were interrupted by a loud clap of thunder, which made us both jump. It felt symbolic, like the storm outside echoed the turmoil inside us as we sat in silence. The weight of our feelings hung heavy in the air. Just then, Lily appeared in the doorway, her small figure framed against the light. "Come inside. It's getting dark." Her innocence is shattered. Our moment is over. As we returned inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that things had irrevocably changed after that night. Everything felt different, and the air was thick with unspoken emotions. I noticed the way Jake would catch my eye during dinner. He'd smile at my jokes with a warmth that sent shivers down my spine. It was thrilling and terrifying, and I knew we were walking a fine line. One afternoon, I found myself preparing dinner in the kitchen while Jake sat nearby working on a school project. The scent of spices filled the air as I chopped vegetables. Stealing, I looked at him and saw that he was deep in concentration, and I felt a surge of affection that I struggled to contain. He asked if I needed any help, breaking my train of thought just as I was chopping vegetables. I replied, handing him a knife, and invited him to join me as we cooked side by side. Our laughter danced around us, blending with the warmth of the moment. The tension crackled like static electricity between us with each brush of our arms, making my heart race. I tried to keep my thoughts from spiraling into places I didn't want to go. After dinner, we settled in the living room to watch a movie. Lily snuggled between us. I could feel Jake's presence next to me, and each shared laugh felt the screen was illuminated by the flickering light, which highlighted the confusion and longing that flickered in his eyes. Jake leaned closer, and our shoulders touched. My breath caught as our eyes met, and I felt a pull towards him that was almost magnetic. Just then, a flash of lightning illuminated the room. The room was illuminated by the lightning and Jake turned to me, his expression a mix of excitement and uncertainty. He whispered, "Can we talk?" His voice was low. I nodded, my heart pounding as we stepped outside onto the porch. The cool evening air enveloped us, and I felt a rush of anticipation about what we talked about before he started. He was hesitating, as if he was weighing his words carefully. I couldn't ignore how I felt anymore. I felt a thrill at his admission, but I knew we had to tread carefully. "I feel it too, Jake. We need to be cautious. We can't let this affect Lily or your dad." He looked down, clearly grappling with the weight of our situation. What if this connection is something meaningful, something that helps us both heal? I felt a lump form in my throat. It could be, but we have to be responsible about it. I don't want to hurt anyone. I care about you, but we have to define what this means. Just then, Lily appeared at the door, calling us back inside. The moment shattered. As I watched Jake pull away, I felt a pang of regret. We had so much to navigate, and I could sense the fragile balance we were trying to maintain as the days turned into a blur of laughter, awkward silences, and fleeting glances. I could no longer deny the gravity of my feelings for Jake. Our conversations once. There was an undercurrent to our time together that I couldn't ignore. Each moment we spent together felt significant and full of depth, leaving me both exhilarated and terrified. One afternoon, I invited Jake for a walk in the nearby park, hoping the fresh air might help us find clarity. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a golden hue around us as we strolled. As we strolled through the trees, I could feel the tension between us growing. Jake began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. He said he'd been thinking about what we talked about and the connection we have. He said it's not just something to brush aside. I took a deep breath. My heart was racing. "No, it's not," I said. "But we need to be careful. There's so much at stake." "Your dad," Lily said. "I don't want to hurt anyone," Jake replied. "I get that," I said. "But what if this connection is exactly what we both need? What if it's meant to help us heal?" Jake's sincerity was evident. I felt a connection with him, and my own vulnerability surfaced. "I want to explore this further, but I need to know we're on the same page. We can't let things get out of control." Jake stepped closer, his gaze locking onto mine. "Let's take it slow, no secrets, just honesty. We can figure this out together." Relief washed over me. I could feel the tension eased and was replaced by hope for a cautious path forward, one step at a time. I agreed, my voice soft as we returned home. I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted. We had a plan and an understanding that could help us navigate this complicated relationship. That night, I lay in bed, thoughts swirling. I thought about my late husband and Jake's mother, and the tricky balance we were trying to strike. A few days later, I found myself awake in the early hours, the house still quiet. I tiptoed to the living room, thinking I'd grab a book as I walked past Jake's room. I noticed his door slightly ajar, and I saw a glow of light and was curious, so I knocked on the door and called out, "Come in." Jake answered, "Come in." He was sitting up in bed reading. When our eyes met, I felt a rush of emotions, comfort, longing, and fear. "Can't sleep," I said, stepping inside. "No," he replied, a small smile breaking through. I sat on the edge of his bed. Our connection clear in the quiet room. I asked him about what I'd asked, my heart racing about us. He replied softly, his gaze steady. "I've never felt this way about anyone before," he said. I swallowed hard, knowing the importance of this moment. "Neither have I," he replied. "It's new and frightening. But it was also beautiful." He reached out, taking my hand gently, the warmth of his touch sent shivers through me, igniting a spark I couldn't ignore. I wanted to figure this out, whatever it may be. I didn't want to lose you in that moment. I realized that the feelings we were grappling with were more than just infatuation. They were a bond that could help us heal if only we navigated it carefully. "Let's promise to communicate," I said, squeezing his hand. "We'll take it slow and make sure we're both comfortable with every step we take." He agreed, his expression earnest. As I sat there, hand in hand with my stepson, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. We were navigating uncharted waters, but with honesty and understanding, we could build something beautiful together. Something that honored our past while looking towards a future filled with possibility. With that thought in my mind, I leaned down and kissed his forehead. It was a gesture of comfort and connection. I knew we had a long journey ahead, but for the first time, I felt hopeful about what lay ahead.